Hey guys, Teresa here. Welcome back to my channel, Lost My Thread. Today I'm going to share what I made and got up to in the month of January. So I'm going to be keeping with the overall format that I created last year with my makes videos. I will be first sharing the sewing projects that I made and then other things that I've been working on creatively, but I also do want to share an update on my 25 for 2025. A lot of you really enjoyed hearing me work through those goals last year for my 24 for 2024, and I thought it was a nice way to just do a bit of a general catch up as well. I will start with the sewing stuff though, because I know that is what my channel is really about and what most of you are here for. As always, there are chapters down below if you want to skip around. Many of you will know that I did do a lot of sewing in December. I had a lot of sewing to deadlines because I was working towards making things for Christmas. And I feel like after Christmas passed, for the end of December and beginning of January, I was just wiped. I was just feeling totally drained, and I did not actually start any sewing till about halfway through January. I'm not somebody who feels like I need to push myself if I'm not feeling excited to sew, because I do it for fun, I do it for a hobby, and I sew when the mood strikes me. But it was nice to get back into it, and the first project that I worked on is what I'm wearing today. This is the Cameron button-up by Helen's Closet. This is a project I've had in mind for a while. I got this fabric last May, and I had the project planned since the fall. I'm really happy that I finally put it together. This fabric is so stunning. And I know you guys, there's going to be plenty of you asking, can you get it? Because I wish you could, honestly. I would like more of it. This is a really beautiful viscose fabric that I got from Lamazi Fabrics. Unfortunately, they do not have any more of this fabric, and I did ask them if they're likely to get any more in, because I could tell you guys I would like to have some, and it doesn't sound like they are. So if it does ever appear, I will let you guys know, because it is truly gorgeous fabric. I think the print is so beautiful. I love the scale of the flowers, the colors on there, the nice contrast against the dark background. I also was just so impressed with how this fabric was to sew. It feels super soft and silky. It has really wonderful movement and drape to it, but at the same time, like, it was just really easy to sew. It was easy to press. It felt kind of just like the best viscose. It's got just a normal weave. It's not a twill, is it? Yeah, no, it doesn't have a twill weave, but it has a little bit more body to it than like a viscose lawn, but it's definitely really beautiful and drapey, and it is feeling wonderful against the skin. Now, my hope with this one was that because I knew I was going to make something possibly a little bit oversized, that it would still drape and just kind of hit my curves where I wanted them to, and I feel like that worked out so well. I really enjoyed putting the shirt together, I have to say. I generally do enjoy Helen's Closet patterns, and I enjoy her instructions. She has really nice tips for beginners as well, so if it's your first shirt pattern, like proper shirt pattern, I feel like it's a good one to go for. This had my favorite ever sleeve placket construction, so I probably can't show you guys super well here, but I pop in some pictures. You know, when you're making a sleeve placket and it doesn't always, this kind of bit at the end doesn't always go in super flush. You get little bumpy bits, or your top stitching isn't quite neat, but you know, it's good enough, and who's looking at those details? And I feel like usually I'll have one that's better than the other, and I'm like, yeah, that's the good one, and this is the one that, things went a little bit pear-shaped. But they both went in beautifully. And I have to say, I just feel like the way it came together, it was just really clever, it was really neat, and I'm really satisfied with that one. And I really am excited to try this shirt in different fabrics and see how this placket behaves, because obviously this is quite a lightweight fabric, so to some degree it was maybe going to be a little bit easier, but it is prone to fraying, and it does feel very secure. So I am generally happy with how that came together. There's a back yoke on this one, it's just a little bit of design details. There's a back yoke on this one, and there's a box pleat on the back as well, so it gives you nice movement when you need to move your shoulders. I feel like it's very comfortable for that. I did have a little bit of issue figuring out what size to go for. So I know this one doesn't have any bust darts, so there's no shaping around the bust, and I wanted to make sure that there was plenty of positive ease, but at the same time, I didn't want to be swimming in it. Now, like I said, because I had a viscose fabric, I knew that I could get away with it being a little bit bigger and it would just drape nicely anyway, but I do think my size was a little bit too big. So I'm somebody who generally needs to do a full bust adjustment if a pattern is drafted for a B-size sewing cup, which most are standard sizing. So Helen's Closet has like 2 size bands, bands and I am too small for the larger size band, which has a D size sewing cup. I'm fitting very squarely in the lower size band, but I do need 2 more inches between my high and my full bust than the patterns are drafted for. So I always have a decision of, do I go for something that's going to fit my high bust? It might be a little bit tight in the full bust, or do a full bust adjustment, or do I just go for what fits my full bust and it might be a little bit bigger, oversized overall. And I decided, because this fabric and this general look, I was hoping to be a little bit more oversized, I went for the bigger size. Next time I would size down. So I basically went for a size up in this area so that it was going to be the size recommended for my full bust. It is off my shoulders. I don't think it's supposed to be off my shoulders. So this is the shoulder seam, you guys. You can see it's definitely too long. So what I will say, even if I size down, I probably do need to do a little bit of a narrow shoulder adjustment, which I do sometimes have to do. But interestingly, when I've made another Helen's Closet shirt, the Gilbert top that has a yoke as well, it doesn't go off my shoulders. So I think this one is possibly because this is meant to be a bit more gender neutral. Maybe the design, the proportions overall are slightly different, but I do think I would need to probably do a narrow shoulder, but also shorten the sleeves. Now that is something that I had forgotten about with Helen's Closet patterns. She's very generous in the sleeve length. I think she probably has quite long sleeves herself, or long arms herself, but this is definitely very long for me. I think, yes, it is a little bit over the shoulder, so even if I pull it up, it's still, I'd say, probably a good inch too long in the sleeve. I do want to make this in other fabrics. I'm interested to make this in a flannel fabric, but I still want to have it a bit oversized, but it doesn't need to be massive. And ideally, if I can have the shoulders where they're meant to be and the sleeves not super long, I would be happier. So I think I will do a muslin of just like a normal muslin fabric before I make that, just to make sure if I do take a narrow shoulder in and I go a size down and I shorten the sleeve, I'm not going to end up with sleeves, you know, up to here. But I feel like overall it's a good pattern and I do think it's really adaptable. The other thing I will say, the collar construction. So this has a collar stand and a collar, so like proper collar construction. I think on the whole the methods are good and I like how it comes together. However, the collar stand itself is quite narrow, I feel like, compared to other shirt patterns, and you're going around a curve at the edge of it when you're getting to the point where you're joining to the actual collar section. And I had a really hard time sewing around this, turning it inside out and being able to tuck all that fabric underneath. And I feel like I've never had such a difficult time with that. I actually ended up sewing it in place, top stitching part of the way around, and realized that I still had fabric kind of sticking out that wasn't quite under, and I really couldn't get it to go underneath, even though I trimmed it a bit. But again, it's very friable fabric. I didn't want to go too close to the edge there. And so I ended up unpicking the whole collar stand, which meant I had to take the top stitching out, and then I had to separate it from both the shirt and the collar, recut new pieces and do it again. And I've got to say, it's not perfect. It's fine, but it's not perfect. This side, for whatever reason, went in better. So I'll show you the better side. And then the less good side. There's a lot more of like a funny angle because it was basically the best I could do to make sure that everything was secure and had space to go in there. And I think if this was just a little bit longer, that would make it easier to be able to tuck things into, just give me a little bit more wiggle room with that curve as well. It's minor details, but I think on the whole, it is a really good pattern and I really didn't have any other issues with it. There was a really fun, clever bit at the beginning when you're creating this sleeve, the button placket at the front, where you basically create a little pin tuck and then fold it back and top stitch that down. It becomes one side of the placket. It's hard to describe, but it was clever and it was fun and satisfying to create. And I feel like overall the finish is really nice. There's a nice curve on the hem that I feel like sits really beautifully. I like the length of the shirt overall. I feel like this would definitely be a good one to wear unbuttoned over things, as well as wearing it just on its own. And I really did want to get some more, I would say, like feminine shirts in my wardrobe. I do want to make some blouses as well, but I don't want to get like too overly frilly and girly. I feel like there's a balance for me where I would want to use like a really pretty feminine style fabric on a little bit more of like a standard shirt, or I would do something with a little bit more frills and ruffles with more of a plain fabric. I feel like that kind of balances more my personal style. So I do feel like this is really good, and this is very much in keeping with the style that I was talking about in my last Me Made May video, and I'm going to revisit that in May again because I feel like I'm doing a pretty good job of kind of honing in on those bits that I felt like were missing, and I feel like this shirt is definitely not something I had in my wardrobe. I think it is such a great one to have. I definitely want to make some more viscose shirts. I definitely want to make more camera button-ups in different fabrics. I feel like it's really beautiful and I really do love it. And I also sewed 2 tops, which are the same top, which are actually the Freya sweater from the Tilly and the Buttons stretch book. Now, I absolutely loved this book when I first got it. It was definitely, to me, I was feeling a little bit less confident with sewing the stretch fabrics, less confident with using my serger, my overlocker, and this really did give me the confidence to play around with those types of fabrics a lot more. I do highly recommend it, but it does have a pretty limited size range, as a lot of sewing books do, and this one only comes with like the standard bust cup size, which is a, again, B size sewing cup, 2-inch difference between high and full bust. I have a 4-inch difference between my high and my full bust. So I knew when I was going to be making this top that I was going to want to do a full bust adjustment. I had made this top previously and I had made a full bust adjustment on that pattern piece, but I have changed sizes and I'm now a size bigger. And so I wanted to revisit that pattern and actually make it work better for me with my current body. I had mentioned this in my winter sewing plans, and then when I looked back at the pattern and my pattern pieces from before, I realized I wasn't 100% correct on some of the things that I said. So this is very much the Freya sweater. It's meant to be a sweater. It's not meant to be a top, but obviously you can make it whatever you want it to be. And the only necklines, because it's a sweater, there is a cowl neck, there is a turtleneck, and a mock turtleneck option. But what I decided to do was to make it my own, and I made a boat neck. Now, I have to say, I think I kind of copied another top that I had to try and figure out kind of the width and the depth of how I wanted the boat neck to be. And so I was happy that I had my old pattern piece because I was able to basically just copy the neckline, which was going with the line, the horizontal line of the cowl neck, but then I went a bit wider so that I was just an inch in from the shoulder notch on each of the sides. Well, as one side it was a cotton fold, and then I just kind of graded that curve out. I did the same on the front and the back, and I have to say the neckline is exactly what I wanted it to be. Now, these tops were very much a copy of a top that I'd made previously, and I had been wearing a load. The first Freya top I made, this might not be the first one I made, but the previous one that I made that I was trying to copy was in a viscose jersey fabric, and it's navy blue, and it's great on its own, but I also find that it works really well layered over other tops, long sleeve tops, turtleneck tops, and it was just such a versatile thing that I decided I wanted to make a couple more. So I have 2 that I finished. The first one is this one in this really lovely floral print. So this is a jersey, cotton jersey fabric I got from Higgs and Higgs. This is part of their nursery collection. So it's designed, I think, to be for baby wear, but obviously it does not have to be. It is incredibly soft. And I would say like the weight and the feel, the movement of it feels more like ready to wear kind of cotton jersey that you would see. I feel like often when you buy cotton jersey in just like fabric bolts, it's often a bit stiffer, but this is really, really soft and nice. I love the colors on there. That small scale floral is so pretty, and I feel like these are really good colors for me. This, like I said, I did do some adjustments and I did do some filming as I went along, so there will be a tutorial coming out soon of how to do a full bust adjustment on a t-shirt, on a knit top, because it's going to be the same generally across the board. The other thing I should say with this neckline, so I told you that I had trimmed the neckline down using the cowl neckline at the sort of horizontal, both at the front and the back, and then I curved out to just an inch inside from that shoulder notch. I then folded it in. After I'd sewn the shoulder seams together, I folded it in by ½ inch and then stitched that down in place. So that way I don't need to have a collar piece, like a neckband, t-shirt neckband, and I feel like that makes it just look a little bit smarter, a little bit more elegant, definitely a bit more work appropriate. So I feel like overall, I love how this one looks. I think it's so pretty on me, and I definitely think it will go with tons of things that are in my wardrobe. I very much see this one being a wardrobe staple. I don't have a ton of printed jersey t-shirts for whatever reason, and I feel like it's nice to have that option in my wardrobe with a lot of my solid bottoms that I wear. And then I did add a tag on this one, both these t-shirts, because I know that in general this is one where it can be a little bit hard to tell the front and the back when I'm getting dressed in the morning. So this one, because I did so many adjustments and I very much made it my own, I used this label, "I was made for you," and on the back it says and Only You. Both the fabric labels on the t-shirts came from Intensely Distracted. They are my favorite sewing label company because they do these cotton ones. They're not scratchy, they're just really nice and soft. I really hate a scratchy label, and I feel like it just ties this one together nicely. So the other one is made in a bamboo jersey fabric that I got from Blackbird Fabrics. This is actually left over from a previous project that I've made. And I thought I had more than I did. So I started off by cutting out the sleeves because I knew I wanted 3/4 length sleeves. Let's get those done. And then when I was looking at the rest of the fabric, I realized I didn't have the full width that I thought I did. I had cut out sections of it for the previous project. So I struggled a bit to get all the pieces out. And what I ended up having to do was to crop this a bit more than I would have intended. Now I have to say it's probably not going to make a huge difference because I have a lot of very high-waisted things that I like to wear in my wardrobe, and it's nice to have something that can kind of hang over the top but not be too long. So I think it's actually quite useful the length that it is, even if that wasn't necessarily the plan. My hope had been to be able to tuck it in, but I think it's going to be probably too short to tuck in. But I do think it works really well over my high-waisted estuary skirt, so I feel like that's a good sign for me that I'm going to have a lot of other things that I can wear it with. I feel like, again, the shape of it is really pretty. I would see if I can play around with layering this over things like long sleeve t-shirts and turtlenecks, but I feel like being that bit more cropped, it might look a little bit strange, but we'll have to play around and see. It might work. But certainly as it is on its own, I mean, really, when are you not gonna appreciate having like a solid, plain, basic t-shirt in your wardrobe? Being black, it will go with everything. I know it's something that I'm gonna be reaching for loads and really grateful to have as a wardrobe staple. So that is it as far as the sewing that I got up to in January. I did also start knitting myself a hat, which is one of my 25 for 2025 goals. I had started a hat that I have abandoned. I frogged that, pulled all the yarn out and started over. And I am now working on the Oslo hat by Petite Knit, which is super easy to begin with. It's literally just straight stockinette stitch, just going around for ages. So I'm taking my time. I'm not necessarily rushing this project, but it's something that I wanted to do at some point this year, and I feel like I've got the right project, I've got the right yarn, and I'm excited to see it come together. Overall, I had a pretty quiet January, which is very much what I was hoping for. I feel like December got pretty busy. It often gets busy that time of year, and it was nice to slow things down a bit in January. I did have one random day outing though, where my husband and I went up to York. My husband plays guitar, and he had spotted a secondhand guitar that was a type of guitar he'd had his eye on for a while, and it looked like it was a really good price. So we decided to go on, drive up to York, 4 hours each way. If it was a good guitar, he would buy it. If it was no good, he would just say goodbye, and that was all fine. Turned out he was very happy, so we now have this one in the house. Don't ask me details, guys. It's a Charvel guitar. He's very happy with it. That is the main thing. But it was nice to see York. I will say it was such a flying visit. So like I said, it was 4 hours each way. So we didn't want to be getting back too late. So we basically went, got the guitar, went into town, had a little bit of a wander around, had some lunch and headed home. I would very much like to go back and have more of a look around. It looked so interesting and cool. Very, like, clearly tons of history there. There was some incredible things with like the old castle. There was tons of beautiful architecture. Very like interesting contrast between like modern shops and the really old architecture as well. It was such a cool place. Definitely will revisit again at some point, but it was a funny way to spend a day, that's for sure. And it turned out well for my husband anyway. Now, little did I know, I was actually investing very well in some brownie points with my husband. I was talking to him about how I want to go to the Stitch Festival this year. I managed to get the weekend off, which I don't always, and I had wanted to go with some of my sewing friends, but unfortunately the two that I would normally go with are both going to be traveling. And so I asked my husband if he'd be willing to go along with me, and he said that having driven him all the way to and from York, because I'm the only one who drives out of the two of us, he felt like he definitely owed me. He was very happy to go along with me. So I am going to the Stitch Festival. So if you guys see me, please do say hi. I'm a very normal person. I'm not like a weird celebrity person, and it would be really nice to chat with you guys about whatever you're buying or thinking about buying. But I'm excited that I've got someone to go along with me. I think it'll be fun to go. I don't go every year, and I don't go to all of the different festivals in London. It's nice to have an opportunity to go sometimes though. Something else that I've been working on in January is a project that I've been making, but it's not anything, it doesn't feel creative because I'm just really following instructions, very like Lego. And that is something my husband got me. It is called the Soul Bookstore. So the idea of this is that you have some very small pieces of wood that you cut out. I want to show you some bits without destroying anything. So you cut them out with a little X-Acto knife to get the pieces out and then file them down so that they're nice and smooth. Things will then interlock and create things to put together your own bookshop. You also have these little tiny rectangles of cardboard that you glue paper around to create what looks like covers on books to make books. This thing is super involved. They give you tweezers to put things together. There's going to be a chair that I'm going to upholster. I am doing like electrical wiring. So let me show you some of the bits that I've done. I'm going to try my best not to knock all of these things over. So the light I cannot show you because it's not properly wired up yet, but this bulb does go on. This is kind of the outer part of the bookshop that hopefully you guys can see. And there are all different types of tiny bookshelves with books on them and little labels of like the book section. Some are like big, tall ones. And then there's also little tiny ones. There's like a newspaper rack. There's a little table with a tiny plant on top, and I had to put all of the plant together. I love that there's just like such a variety of like different styles of bookshelves. So all of the construction is very fun and different. It is such a great, just relaxing, mindful kind of activity. It's nice sometimes to do something where you don't have to like think about how you're doing it so much and you can just sit and spend some time. And it is broken up very much into small elements. So I can spend like an hour and a half working on one of the bookshelves and all the books that go on it, for example. It's been a really nice, calm thing to do in January. I'm looking forward to slowly working through it as long as it's going to take me. My plan is to just put it up on the shelf at one point when it's finished, but I think it's going to be really cute. I love books. I love bookshops. I think it was a really fun gift that I got for Christmas. Very much keeping in the relaxing front, I also did a jigsaw puzzle, another jigsaw puzzle I got for Christmas. It is the Winter Wheel. It's very pretty, really nice colors on there, 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. It was a nice one to put together, very satisfying when the pieces went together. And this was my first puzzle of the year, and it is one of my goals in 2025 to do a puzzle a month. So I do have my February puzzle lined up and ready to go. And so I can definitely feel like I'm on track with my goals, having finished one so far. Now, speaking of my 25 for 2025, if you guys are not familiar, I did make a video about things I would like to do this year. I wouldn't necessarily see them as like resolutions because a lot of them are relatively simple things. They're not necessarily like a one and done thing. It's more about kind of a mindset and ethos and things I would like to do throughout the year. But if you haven't seen that video, I'll put a link to it up here and down in the description box. But I do actually have something that I can cross off the list already, which I think is pretty good going. There's definitely a few of these that I'm working toward, but one that I've actually finished, which is number 21, to complete Prana, a 7-day yoga journey from Yoga with Adriene. So here we go. First one. Crossed off. Always a good feeling. Like I said, I've had other things that I've been working on that are in these goals. One of them I am calling my Year of Burton. My husband and I went to the exhibition, the Tim Burton exhibition at the Design Museum in London last year. Really enjoyed it. We both felt like we kind of understood him a little bit more and got his perspective and where he was coming from, looking at a lot of his old sketches, ideas that he'd had that kept recurring through, and we thought it would be fun to work through all of his films and to keep it a little bit more interesting because we have seen quite a few of his films before. We decided to create some bingo cards. We've done this before with other movies that we weren't necessarily like super engaged with, so we decided at one point to watch a lot of Nicolas Cage movies because he's so wacky and wild. It's quite funny to watch a ton of his movies in a row. It does start to get old though. So we put together like an action movie cliche bingo card at that point to try and tick off and see who would get like 5 in a row first. We then also did one with Fast and Furious because honestly I was kind of 50-50 whether I ever wanted to see those movies, but the idea of putting in as many like bad cliches that we could think of and then working through on our bingo checklist made it a lot more fun to watch. The Tim Burton, we both want to watch these movies, but like I said, it's quite a few repeats. And so we thought it would be funny to try and make a list of the things that we knew are like standard Tim Burton tropes, like go-tos, things that he tends to go for. So some of them we decided to make them like just a one and done. If it's on the bingo card, we would cross it off. So some examples of that one are leather and lace in one outfit, super long tongue, giant lollipop. I will say we tried to avoid putting anything down that we knew for sure was going to come up, because that would feel just a little bit like cheating, but it was more like, what's the overall aesthetic of Tim Burton? And then there were some things that we know definitely come up more than once, so we wanted to try and make it a little bit more interesting to see how many times these things come up. So we decided we needed to see black and white stripes 5 times, like 5 different films, before we would cross it off. And same with frizzy black goth hair, dark circles or black circles around eyes. Johnny Depp and Helena Bonham Carter each needed to be in at least 5 movies before we cross them off. We didn't bother checking IMDb to see if it's going to happen. I think it'll be more fun just to see as we go. We have the bingo cards that we've been working on because we have started watching some movies. So I'm on the top and my husband's on the bottom. They're obviously not in the same place. We randomized where these things are. And in the middle there is a little Jack Skellington from The Nightmare Before Christmas. The idea of this one is that we have seen from the exhibition that he often puts in like a secret Jack Skellington in his movies. And so if we could spot a sneaky Jack Skellington that you might not notice, then we would cross that middle one off. I think it would be fun to keep an eye out for that one for sure. I will put the list of what we've got on our bingo cards down below if you guys did think you wanted to watch some Tim Burton movies and play along, because I do think it just makes them a little bit more interesting, like I said, especially if you've seen them before. So we've been working basically through the beginning. We are a bit on the fence about Frankenweenie, which we probably will watch at some point, but the original Frankenweenie, it's only 30 minutes, it's not like a full feature film. But we have now watched Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Beetlejuice, Batman, Edward Scissorhands. It's not a bad start, right? So most weekends will end up watching a movie, and so that's what we're tending to do right now for our movies. It's been fun to rewatch those movies, especially after having been to the exhibition. I think we're enjoying them a little bit more. And most of them are on Disney+. So if you guys are on Disney+ and you're interested in watching any of his movies, that was one of the things we found out at the exhibition, is that he worked for Disney when he was young. And so it makes sense that he would have like a working relationship with Disney and have his films on there. But it's been fun to work through, and I'm looking forward to continuing along later on this month. We haven't decided the prize yet for whoever gets the bingo first. We were debating like maybe a black and white striped sock, but I already have black and white striped socks, so maybe that's not quite so fun. If you have any suggestions of like a really inexpensive, like our Fast and Furious prize, whoever got the bingo first got a little mini Lego race car. So like nothing too expensive, but it'd be fun to have something as a prize that feels Tim Burton-esque. And then my other 2025 goal that I've been chipping away at is reading some books. So I wanted to read at least 25 books for 2025 because it was cute, because it matches. I'm not actually sure how many books I read last year, so it's entirely possible that I read that many. But either way, I feel like it's nice to give myself like a reason to read a little bit more. And I feel like I do want to try and make sure that in my downtime, I'm giving myself some proper relaxation, not just like finding another thing to do. And it's been nice to be working through some books. So I've got 3 that I finished and 1 that I'm working on. The one that I'm working on, and this is going to be read throughout the year, and I know this is going to be an easy one to tick as one of my 25 because it's a single poem every day. So I got this as a Christmas gift, a happy poem to end every day. So every day I have a poem to read, and it's very much been a nice little routine as a relaxing thing to do before I go to bed. I think having bedtime routines and rituals is quite good generally for people for sleep. I have to say I'm a pretty good sleeper, but as it happens, I've been enjoying reading this one before bed for sure. I'm hoping to find some new favorite poets because you never know. There's definitely some good ones out there that I'm sure I'm not familiar with. I think there was maybe 1 or 2 that I did like in January particularly that I will put down in the description box. And I am somebody who does often read multiple books at once. I feel like if I have a book that's a particular mood and vibe, but I'm not necessarily in that headspace, I will save it for particular times of day to read it. There are books that are a little bit easier to just pick up and read a bit of and then put down again. There's books that you really need to get stuck into. So the 3 that I finished this month are these. I'm going to go through them because you probably can't see them. I'm going to talk about them in the order in which I finished them rather than when I started them. So the first one that I finished is Dead End Memories by Banana Yoshimoto. I found Banana Yoshimoto, I feel like maybe 3 years ago, thereabouts. She's a Japanese writer. She writes short stories and novels. I really love her writing. I generally like Japanese writing in general. It's often very dreamy and magical, a bit strange. I will say hers is very much in that vein. I feel like her writing in particular, though, it's very poetic. There's a real feel, a real mood to her writing. There is definitely a big focus on grief. There's often a lot of food as well, like people who work in restaurants, and there's definitely some of that in here as well. But I just feel like it's one of those kinds of writing, you know, we probably all have our own of these, where I just enjoy the process of reading her books. Whatever it is, even if I don't particularly love the story and where it's going, I just really enjoy reading her writing. So this was definitely a nice one to read. It is 5 short stories about 5 women, and they're not interlinked or anything. They just happen to be about 5 different women, and there's a lot of things with their relationships. There's some very deep philosophical stuff in there. Super interesting, really enjoyable read. I will definitely keep this one and reread it at some point for sure. I do recommend Banana Yoshimoto, but this book in particular was a good one. The second one I finished was this. This is Dirk Gently's Holistic Detective Agency. I was curious to read this one because there was actually a series that I saw on Netflix. I don't think it was a Netflix series. It might have been, but it was on Netflix with the same title. The author, Douglas Adams, he's the author of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I really enjoy his writing, generally. I loved Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. They are really funny books. They're very fun books. If you haven't read them, I do recommend them. The movie was definitely not quite the same. And this TV show, it's not quite the same as this book. A lot of his adaptations are quite different from the original, which I think is a nice thing. It's a little bit more interesting. Even Dirk Gently himself, I think, is quite different in the TV series than it is in the book. But I enjoyed the TV series enough to be curious about the books, and I thought it would be fun to read more of his writing. I think Douglas Adams, he's clearly a very intelligent, well-educated man, and I feel like when he's writing, he's just basically doing his best to be very silly. Everything's very random. You never know what to expect. There's a character that's an electric monk who's from the future, who has been created to believe everything in the world so that none of us have to go to the trouble of believing anything. Like I said, it's very silly. So it's not anything that I would get too, wrapped up in, but it was a very nice, easy thing to just be able to pick up and put down, have some chuckles here and there. It's not quite the caliber, quite the same level as Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but it's a fun read, and I definitely do look forward to reading the other books in this series at some point. And the last one I finished was this one, House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielovsky. This is a hard one to try and describe. So this one, as you probably can tell, it's a chunky book. It's a big boy. And this was the one that I was reading. I kept at the bedside so that if I, had a decent amount of time to read before bed, I would pick this up and read for a bit. It is definitely one that can be very confusing, just even at the best of times. But if you're reading just a half a page, you can be completely lost with where you even were on the page. It's a very unusual book. I mean, I can flip through and show you some of the way that it looks is even quite bizarre. So it's a really, really odd piece of writing, super interesting piece of writing. But I think the way to describe this, the basic premise of this is that it is someone is writing about a book that has been written about a film and some other books, which sounds like complete nonsense, which is kind of what it is. But essentially, there is this creepy house, this strange house that has some really unusual characteristics, and there's these doorways that appear and disappear. When you go into the doorways, they're never ending, completely pitch black, very cold. Corridors start to change. There are people trying to explore these corridors. So that's the initial kind of the core of the film that was made. That there's then somebody who wrote about it and basically started to go completely insane and get kind of wrapped up in the madness of the house. And so now this other person has been reading their book and is equally getting wrapped up in it and starting to go quite crazy. Like I said, it's super hard to explain, but you have elements of the original text from the original book, and there are tons of footnotes, which are basically all just fake made up footnotes. There are parts where things are starting to be written upside down and backwards because the person who's writing it is starting to go a bit loopy. I feel like it's a very immersive book. You feel like you are kind of in the space, and it starts to feel quite spooky, quite creepy. It's super interesting. It's definitely very original. I have never read anything like it. It was really cool, and definitely I like appreciate the amount of work that went into putting it together. I should say there's definitely some quite explicit sexual stuff, so if you are not into that, just be aware, be warned. But that's not the bulk of the book. But yeah, it was definitely a really like interesting psychological novel. It's not something that I think is for everyone, but if you're into kind of strange, spooky, eerie vibes and you are okay to read something that's a little bit, maybe a little bit different, I would give it a go. I hope you guys have had a good January. I would love to hear what you've been getting up to, whether it is sewing stuff you've been doing or just other general life stuff you've been getting up to. I hope you did enjoy today's video. Definitely a bit of a longer catch up. Please do give me a like if you did like it. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel if you want to catch up with other videos coming soon, and I will see you then. Bye!